Good morning, RE.THINK Church. My name is Abby, and we are excited to have you here this morning. You all made it to church despite the snow. I'm sure most of you had to shovel, so we just appreciate you guys being here this morning, and we're glad you could make it safe. If you are new or visiting with us, we'd love to connect with you in the back after the service over by our One Cup Cafe. We have a gift for you guys just for being here. And then I wanted to talk a little bit, next Sunday is going to be our Mission Sunday. So we're going to start doing this once a month where we take a special separate offering for ministry that we care about. And next week we're going to be collecting money for a mission called Destiny's Hope. And it is a place that helps rescue girls from sex trafficking overseas. And when we are able to raise funds for them, $1,500 can rescue a girl out of sex trafficking, and not just rescue her, but then they also help provide jobs and skills and just recovery for these girls coming out. So it's really something that's close to our hearts, and I think it's close to the Lord's heart as well. So just be praying about that throughout the week. If the Lord is calling you to give, there will be that separate time next Sunday to be able to do that. And we're excited to partner with Destiny's Rescue. We have one of our own that works with Destiny's Rescue too, that used to be up here in Northwest Indiana. So we have a special connection that way as well. And then lastly, I just want to thank you guys for giving to the vision and mission of RE.THINK Church. If you guys gave in the last year via check or online, you should have received an email with your giving statements for your tax returns. So be sure to be looking out for that if you haven't seen that already. And just thank you guys for giving. If you do want to give to the vision and mission of RE.THINK Church, there's two ways you can do that. You can either give online at rethinkchurch.cc, or you can give in the back at the black box by the door. Thanks for being here, and enjoy the sermon this morning.
When the centurion and those with him who were keeping watch over Jesus saw the earthquake and the things that had happened, they were terrified and said, "Truly, this man was the Son of God." Many women who had followed Jesus from Galilee and looked after him were there, watching from a distance. Among them were Mary Magdalene, Mary the mother of James and Joseph, and the mother of Zebedee's sons. When it was evening, a rich man from Arimathea named Joseph came, who himself had also become a disciple of Jesus. He approached Pilate and asked for Jesus' body. Then Pilate ordered that it be released. So Joseph took the body, wrapped it in clean, fine linen, and placed it in his new tomb, which he had cut into the rock. He left after rolling a great stone against the entrance of the tomb. Mary Magdalene and the other Mary were seated there, facing the tomb. The next day, which followed the preparation day, the chief priests and the Pharisees gathered before Pilate and said, "Sir, we remember that while this deceiver was still alive, he said, 'After 3 days, I will rise again.' So give orders that the tomb be made secure until the third day. Otherwise, his disciples may come, steal him, and tell the people, 'He has been raised from the dead.' And the last deception will be worse than the first." "Take guards," Pilate told them. "Go and make it as secure as you know how." They went and secured the tomb by setting a seal on the stone and placing the guards. Chapter 28. After the Sabbath, as the first day of the week was dawning, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to view the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, because an angel of the Lord descended from heaven and approached the tomb. He rolled back the stone and was sitting on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothing was as white as snow. The guards were so shaken by fear of him that they became like dead men. The angel told the women, "Don't be afraid, because I know you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here, for he has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, 'He has risen from the dead, and indeed he is going ahead of you to Galilee. You will see him there. Listen, I have told you.' So departing quickly from the tomb, with fear and great joy, they ran to tell his disciples the news. Just then, Jesus met them and said, 'Greetings.' They came up, took hold of his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus told them, 'Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to leave for Galilee, and they will see me there.'"
All right. So if you've been here for a while, you're like, "Hey, we're in the last chapter of Matthew, right?" So we're there. We're getting inching our way there. So But I told you, like, next week we're going to, like, wrap it up, and then we're going to step right into this next message series, and we'll get into that one later. But what we just read, this account of Jesus' death and resurrection, burial, and then his resurrection, this is what we're going to work through today. And it's one of those accounts that, I'll be honest, as a pastor, like, going through the actual study of theological stuff, you can see throughout history where people are like, I don't know, it was a physical, maybe it was a spiritual one, maybe he like spiritually rose from the dead. And there's a pastor several years ago that kind of gave this analogy of like when you're looking into theological truths or realities, that you can kind of compare it like a spring. Like think about like a trampoline, that you take one spring out, is it really going to affect the whole trampoline? Not really. But you can stretch it, you can play with it, you can toy with it. And I used to love this analogy until I've watched spring after spring get pulled out of that trampoline, stretched and pulled, and very rarely ever get put back into the trampoline. We've seen this, and this is one of the theological truths, the realities of the physical body, of Jesus' physical death, and his physical resurrection is a foundational aspect. You cannot take this out of the Christian faith. If there's a church that goes around saying, well, he wasn't physically dead, he wasn't physically rose from the dead, that's a cult, not a church. Just want to give you that heads up. And you should probably walk out of it. Most likely they also dress the same, they have the same haircuts, they probably all eat the same food, they probably all shop from the same online pyramid scheme of everything, right? Just walk away from it. So, just giving you the heads up, but here's the reality of it. It's so easy to get into the church world and be like, oh, what do they actually believe? I would encourage you, go on our website and see what we actually believe when it comes to our faith and our foundational theological things. That's why we put it out there on the website. We're just like, hey, if you want to know what it is, here it is. If you want the shortened version, you get the short version. If you want the expanded version, you click that extra long link that we took 7 months for us to write through and say, this is what we truly believe. Here it is. If you don't agree with it, there's thousands of other churches. Enjoy. Right? That's part of this. Now, when it comes down to this analogy, I've always wrestled through, what kind of analogy do we actually think like? I grew up in a very strict way of thinking about it. I remember in college, the professor that I had when it came to theology was it's like a wall. You have to have these bricks, and you have to have the foundations and all this. And I was like, I hate that analogy, because what if something is there any wiggle room? Is there any way of expanding and all that? And so I hated that analogy. I love the spring analogy because I'm like, yep, I get it. Like I said, I've started to watch the faith get literally just kind of dismantled by heresies and all that. That pastor who wrote that book and put that into his analogy later on, probably 5 years later, 7 years later, came out with a book that was straight heresy. So there's that one. So I was like, awesome, way to go. And it kind of rocked my world as a pastor, because I was like, hey, I love this teachings and all that, and I was like, holy crap, he went way off the edge. So there's that. So I started really kind of thinking through, how do we take the theological truths and put it into analogy? And I think the best way of doing it is an ecosystem. They don't seem, these theological truths don't necessarily seem so important, but when you take one of them out, it wipes out the whole thing. Think about if we removed ants or bees from our ecosystem. They're nuisances, they're annoying, you wipe them out though, and it's devastating to our ecosystem, right? So that's one of the ways to think about it. We have to start looking through there. And so there's going to be some foundational ones that we can work on. There's going to be some theological truths that we have to maybe agree to disagree on some of the ways that you want to read it. Because I'll be honest, when it comes to the Bible, there's some secondary things that you can say. You can stand on both sides of the thing and say, well, the Bible says this. Right? So you have to kind of find that out. But the crucifixion, his burial, and his resurrection is not one of those things that you have a grave room on or wiggle room on. So that's that. I just wanted to make sure we started out with that one. Now, let's go into, and Betsy was asking me this morning, hey, what's the message about? And I was like, actually, how much I hate winter. And she's like, oh, I thought it was about the resurrection. I was like, it is, but I hate winter. Past Christmas, I just think the snow should be gone, and it should be at least 50 degrees with some sun, right? And every single year, there's this guy out here, right? You see these people out there with shorts, and they're shoveling, or they're walking in the middle of the snow, right? We had a guy in Michigan. In Michigan, we had a lot more snow than we have here, and this would be a weekly occurrence for us, at least kind of a snow thing. So we had a whole snow crew. There's 40 or 50 guys who would go out there and shovel the campus and make sure we plowed and all this. And this dude always wore shorts. His name was Ron. I'm like, dude, you want some pants? He's like, why? I haven't worn pants in 25 years. And I was like, sweet. Awesome. But you see this guy, you don't see the guy walking like he's the postal guy. Like, you just see these kind of guys, right? And they're like, yeah, this is it. And I'll be honest, like, this time of year, this is the most challenging part of mine for me personally, where I'm like, the snow's melting, it's gray except for today, because, you know, we just got new snow. Awesome, more stuff to smell. And it's going to turn to mud. And anytime you walk in, like, non-concrete areas, you're going to bring in mud and all this. You're like, great, well, awesome. It's overcast, the days are shorter, hardly any sun. Like, I was in my classroom Friday, and I was watching the sun just go down. I was there late working on a project, and I was like, seriously, like, I'm not going to see the sun at all. You know what I mean? Like, it just hated the whole existence. But, like, it just gets overwhelming. And then, I'm not a person who knows anything about flowers at all, but several years ago, I was training for a 25K, like running 25 kilometers. And you have to start in Michigan, you have to start in the winter because the race was like April, May time. And I ran it in a snowstorm, so I was like, that's awesome. I don't know why I did those things in my 30s. Now I'm just like, I stay inside and work out, because that's a whole lot better. But when I was running this, I remember I was strapping on like the little, basically the ice cleats that you can like get traction and run. And the road, like I was running a 5-mile route this time, so I was going 2.5 miles out and then 2.5 miles in. And I noticed on this like fence line, this burst of color. I was like, that's weird. Don't know what it was, and it just kept going. Normally I stay away from yellow snow, so I was like, I'm just not going to explore that. And so I remember like running by, and then I saw this person getting their mail, and it was like all of a sudden, like I noticed it, all these little pockets of flowers. There's purple, there's yellow, there's greens, and I was like, what the crap is this? So I stopped and I asked the lady, I was like, hey, what is this? And she's like, this is a crocus flower. Now, I'll be completely honest, she totally could have made this up, and I'm here telling you about this, because I'm not a person who knows flowers, right? But I remember every single year that I would see these, hey, like, winter is not eternal. Does that make sense? Like, there's this reminder that when you see these flowers, that there's an end date for winter. And I remember running, and I was just like, it was coming towards the end of my run, and this is the first time I had this conversation with her. I was like, so what's this one? And she's like explaining the whole history. And I was like, I didn't know I asked. You know what I mean? Like, but I recognized there's this beauty of this, like, in the midst of all the darkness and all the gloom and all the gross snow. Like, we have pretty snow now, but there's like 2 days it's gonna be gross snow. And all of the midst of this, somehow, in some way, there's going to be this burst of color. It's going to be a great reminder that winter's not eternal. And this, like the crocus flower and the empty tomb, bring me hope. That what we're experiencing now doesn't have to be always what we're going to experience. And this is where we're going to work through today. Just this reminder that the crocus flower does not wait for spring to be ready and then come in. It's almost as if the crocus flower is bringing spring along. Like, let's rush this in. Let's bring this in, right? This is what the empty tomb does. This is what it looks like for us to step in as followers of Jesus, to say, okay, I can work into this, okay? So what we just read, or somebody read for us, I'll put it that way, is this reality of it. That like, we're going to walk through the events of this. Now, we have to ask ourselves, who is actually at the cross when Jesus is dying on the cross? Are Peter? Are James? Nathaniel? Simon the Zealot? The dude who's like, I'm going to fight everyone, let's just win this whole thing? None of them are there. It's a whole bunch of women. Matthew, Mark, and Luke tell us that it's all women there. John is the only gospel writer who says John, or the one Jesus loved, which is like, it's himself. But it's the ancient world, they didn't want to name themselves. They thought it was more humble to say the one that Jesus loved, rather than John or myself was there. Like, yeah, passive aggressiveness and all that of the disciples, it's there. You can see it. It just makes us like, hey, I can connect with you, right? Like, you're not perfect, I'm not perfect, and somehow God used them, so maybe God will use us. So, like, this is what we see. But Matthew, Mark, and Luke, they tell us it's all women there. And there's a whole conversation I don't have time to get into out of the Gospel of John, of Jesus' conversation with John while he's on the cross and Mary and all that. But We'll save that for a later date. But here we see these bunch of women, which gives us the question: how do we have the eyewitness account of what the centurion said? How do we have the eyewitness account of what Jesus said from the cross? How do we have the eyewitness account of anything that happened there? It's all because of this woman. As the gospel authors started to put together, they're like remembering everything they're doing, because remember, they're not writing it in real time. This is like 70 years later, after the events of Jesus. 30 years for Matthew or so, right? So he's remembering these things, and he's going back saying, hey, what did the centurion say again? Hey, what did the criminal say? The only reason we know this is because of women. And we have to come to this point where, like, the movement of Jesus, the whole movement of everything that we see, it's elevating everyone. It's not making one gender better than the other. It's like literally elevating everyone to the same playing field, saying no matter who you are, no matter where you came from, no matter what your gender is, you have value, you have dignity, and you have worth. And this is, to me, this is one of the foundational aspects of following Jesus. And if we come to a church where you're like, or a movement or something like that that says, hey, no, there should be a difference in genders. Like, once again, just explore the Bible and explore what the gospel says and all that. And so, as we've been working through this, you have to keep that in mind, because there's something crucial about this, that women are there and the male disciples aren't. Now, there's some dynamics here, like if Simon the Zealot, this trained assassin turned followers of Jesus, shows up, I bet you there's a threat there with the centurion and the Roman guards, right? So there's that dynamic going on here. But there's something beautiful about the fact that women are there, and they're telling the gospel authors the events and all of that. And then they write this all down, and all of a sudden now we have this gospel account because of women's eyewitnesses, right? Now, if you've been working through this, it just seems like it should end right there. And you've been working following the gospel according to Matthew. We see that Jesus shows up, we see the genealogy, and it's like this burst of color in this overwhelming, gray, evil, just oppressive world that they're living in, right? And then Jesus, he gathers disciples and he starts proclaiming the kingdom of God. He's saying, hey, what we're knowing now is not always going to have to happen. It may be real, but it's not the truth. It's not the most real thing that we're going to experience. And then he heals people. And then he says, hey, the blind can see, the deaf can hear, the lame can walk, and all that. He's proclaiming the new day is coming, this new kingdom is coming. And then his message is met with resistance. But some Pharisees actually start to follow Jesus. Some are resistant of Jesus, but it's this big mixture of everything. And then if you're a follower of Jesus, if you're one of the ladies there, imagine seeing everything that Mary's witnessed, everything that Jesus has gone through, but now he's hanging on the cross. And all the hope that she had is now dying on this cross. Right? If you're one of those disciples, you're seeing everything that just took place, and now all of a sudden you're like, what in the world? It's all coming to an end. Is there any, what's the point of hoping? And I don't know about you, but sometimes I feel like that too. I look at the world and the circumstances, I look at the snow that's on the ground, and I'm like, what's the point of hoping for spring? Right? What's the point of hoping for anything different? This is how everything is going to be. And it's all of that is coming true, right? But then we see that Jesus continually offers new things for us. And so this is part of that reality. And then going back to the gospel account in Matthew chapter 27, we see this next detail which is very strange. We see this wealthy man from Arimathea named Joseph. And he boldly goes to Pilate asking for the body of Jesus, which seems reasonable to us, right? Right? But Jesus is a convicted state felon who's now been put to death. In Roman first century world, people who hung on a cross and died on a cross didn't get buried. There's no value or dignity to their life. They would be left there as an example of don't cross Rome. For a wealthy, let's pause really quickly, a wealthy follower of Jesus. If you've read through the gospel according to Matthew, doesn't that seem like an oxymoron? Can you really be a wealthy follower of Jesus? If you've read through this, you're like, whoa. But it does tell us that maybe camels do pass through the eye of needles every once in a while. Maybe it's not how much money you have, but what you're doing with what you have. The concept is not necessarily like how much money you have, but maybe it's like, what are you doing with what you have? Meaning this. Like, think about the prostitute who goes in to anoint Jesus' body. She brings in a perfume, like a jar of perfume that came from India that cost thousands of dollars, and she anoints his feet. The little boy who only had a few things of bread and fish openly, willingly gives it to Jesus. Right? And you see this time and time again where people are living what we call open-handed towards Jesus. Like, Jesus, this is all I have. Can you do anything with it? Right? But here's this wealthy man who follows Jesus. He's a disciple of Jesus. And he comes in and he honors Jesus with his wealth. He honors Jesus by saying, hey, I'm just gonna give you what I have. What's he have? He has a tomb. But somehow he's going to leverage his wealth and his influence to go meet with Pilate. Like, can you and I just walk in and go meet with the governor in Indiana? Be like, hey, I don't need to set up an appointment. I'm just going to go. I just need to have a conversation with him. That's not happening, right? And if it does, let's talk. But like, this is what Joseph of Arimathea does. He walks in, and he has this meeting with Pilate, and he requests for the body of Jesus to be taken down and to be buried and to be wrapped up and stuff like that. So the burial process for the Jewish people, you can show the next picture, Shad, is this tomb. This is not Joseph of Arimathea's tomb, but here's a tomb. And so if you show this next picture, you can see these random small boxes. So what would happen is the body would be wrapped, and be spices and myrrhs and all this other stuff kind of put in there. It's kind of like help keep the smell down. And Matthew tells us that Joseph wrapped his body in fine linen, not just linen. Like, he wasn't just going to wrap him in scraps. It was like, hey, let's go find some great cloth to put him in there. Is Joseph of Arimathea hoping for a resurrection? Not if he's wrapping the body in linen, right? Like, if he's going to put this cost and expense and stuff to it, go back to that picture, Shad. And so when you see this, he wraps in the body into this. And what the process would be is they would wrap the body, put him on the slab, and kind of wait 6 months to a year maybe. And then they would put him in these boxes, called bone boxes. And they literally would collect all the boxes, all the bones, and put them in these boxes, and then put them into those little holes that are kind of up there along the wall. And so you get several generations in a tomb of a family. Joseph of Arimathea takes a brand new tomb, and he offers Jesus his very best. Not just his very best, but his very first. Think about this, like he's saying, hey, like this is meant for my whole family, but you're going to be the very first person to sit in this tomb. There's something special about Joseph of Arimathea using whatever he has, his wealth and his influence, to bring honor and glory to Jesus. The question is, what are we doing with what we have? Are we bringing honor and glory to Jesus with what we have? And are we willing to give Jesus our best and our first? Even when it comes to like, hey, all I've got is a tomb. Right? Like this is what Joseph of Arimathea offers Jesus. And I think there's something crucial that you and I could learn from in this regard. And notice where the ladies are. This whole process. They're right outside the tomb, aren't they? They are not leaving Jesus' body. They're like tracking with him. They're like, okay, he's on the cross, I'm there. He's taken down from the cross, I'm there, I'm going to watch this. Is he going into the tomb? I'm going to sit there and I'm going to wait. Now, they couldn't sit there and wait during the Sabbath, so they went home or went somewhere else to follow this process. And then the very next morning, right? And so after this, this is like, we just read right over it. But this is such a unique event and details that Matthew puts in here. That the body was taken down. It wasn't left for the birds of the air to just kind of pick apart and stuff like that. But let's envision yourself sitting there. You're married and you're just watching this whole thing take place. And you're just like, what's going on? You saw this hope. You saw this burst of color when Jesus showed up. His public ministry starts and you're like, sweet, this is great. And then, like, the resistance happens. That's just part of it. Like every revolutionary has some resistance and pushback from other people, right? And then when Jesus gets arrested, what do you feel? Like, yeah, well, every revolutionary has some kind of arrest that takes place. And then when he has a mock trial, you're just kind of like, okay, cool. So, like, then he gets put on the cross. But you're sitting there going, well, I've seen him heal other people. Like I literally watched him take a hand that was crippled and just kind of stretch it out. You're hoping that Jesus can do this. You've seen him save other people. Well, surely he can save himself if that's the end goal, right? And so then he dies. And what do you, like, all of your hope and all of your dreams are there, right? It's this feeling that, like, even when your planet or your state looks like the planet Hoth from Star Wars, you can still hope for some sunshine, right? Like, I can't wait to get sunburned. Does that make sense? Like, I can't wait for the summer. Now, in the midst of the snow, in the midst of all this other stuff, I can't wait to feel, like, if I hear one person complain about how hot it is this summer, I may throw a punch them. Because you know what? Right now, when I was shoveling the snow this morning, I can't wait for the heat. And I am weird, I get that, but, like, I will probably get sunburned and be like, yes, right? Like, that's part of this reality. And so some of us, we may feel like that. There's this reality that when we feel like it's just oppression, it's just evil, it's just this way of life, you just have to get used to it. No. This is the beauty of the crocus flower. This is the beauty of the empty tomb. That even in the midst of this, there's still hope for new life. And if you're a follower of Jesus and imagine being married, just watching the tomb, the stone get rolled over, and then all of a sudden the guards have to show up, and they put this like wax seal on it and stuff like that, and you're like, oh, sweet, great, and all that. Like, you're watching this going, this is the end. No one's going to get in, and no one's like, if the seal's there, like, even if Jesus' body raises up from the dead, like, how's he going to open the tomb up? We're not talking like a little small tomb, like stone. We're talking like this massive stone that would take like dozens of people to try to even move it. And so here you are just trying to figure out how you're going to do this. And so what do? You can either lose hope or you just like give up, right? And so this is part of that process that we have to look through. And if you like imagine tracking, if you're married, you're tracking, you're seeing like somebody like Matthew who's wealthy but as like a social outcast, and all of a sudden now he's part of the inner like group of the followers of Jesus. Or you see like Simon, who is a zealot, who get invited in. You see women of all these scandalous backgrounds get invited in, and you hear Jesus say, all you have to do is really like trust the Father, right? Like he loves you. He takes care of the lilies of the field. He'll take care of you, right? Jesus even says like, my burden is light. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. Does the cross feel like a very light burden to you right now? Does that feel like it's maybe hyperbole? Maybe it's just like, maybe Jesus like had that late night pizza. He's like, hey, this sounds like great to say. It's going to be really great to be like, we can put this on a meme and put it on Instagram in 2,000 plus years. It's going to be awesome. It's going to be so great. With a calendar for like the desktop calendars. But don't worry, we weren't really serious about this, right? If you're a follower of Jesus, you're starting to question everything, aren't you? You've watched this take place. You've heard him say these things. You've watched him say this. You've seen him compassionately, lovingly, empathetically love people who are far from society, far from God. And then all of a sudden, here he is. He's on the cross. And it's so easy just to give in and be like, this is just how it is. Rome always wins. The religious system always takes place, always is going to win. I just can't find hope. I can't do anything. But then Matthew chapter 28 comes. Right? The resurrection happens. The earthquake takes place. The ladies are coming. And now, I'll be honest. I bet you the ladies felt the earthquake. It was like, I wonder what that was. And it says that the angel came down from heaven to this earth. Did they see the angel come down to the earth? Was it like a shooting star? Was it like this beam of light? We don't know. But somehow they encountered the angel. They have a conversation with him. And then how do they leave that moment with Jesus to go tell the disciples? Verse 8. They leave with joy and they leave full of fear. Ever been there? Where you have all this joy of what you just experienced, but you have no clue what this means at the same time. It's possible to have these mixture of emotions, to be like, I'm excited for what this means, but I'm also terrified of what this means. Because if this event happens, like I'm full of everything. I don't know about you, but I've felt that time and time again of like joy and fear, joy and fear. And it just means that you're in good company with followers of Jesus. That's just part of this process. This is what it really kind of takes place and means for us. And so, they run, they meet the disciples, and they do that. See, here's where it comes back into the crocus flower again for me. In a world of gray and overcast, and it just feels like the world is full of evil and division. It just feels like, is there any point in this? Is there any point in hoping for something better? Like, for the future generation, should we even try, or is it just worth it just to go through your days, like what the author of Ecclesiastes says, just go through life and just hope for the best, right? At times it feels like this because it feels like, are we ever going to get anything better, right? And I'll be honest, like pre-2016, 17, if you're a Cubs fan, you felt the same way. You're like, what's the point of even hoping, right? And if you're a Bears fan today, you're like, sweet, like there's hope. Like we got rid of coaches and people, right? Like maybe there's hope. Maybe we can actually hire a competent coach. Maybe we can actually hire somebody who's going to make us so that we're a contender and relevant again. Like there's always these seasons of hope, and this is what the beauty of the Crocus Flower does. It brings us a reminder that it doesn't always have to be this way. So let me ask you this. Think about this really quickly. What are you actually hoping for that you're afraid to hope for? That you're like, it's there, that you're like, you don't even want to talk about it, you don't even think about it, because it's too, like, it almost feels like too good. And if you hope for it, you're going to be devastated. Now, once again, what we've realized that here is this, that you and I are at the center of the gospel. We're at the center of this, but Jesus didn't die for us just to be like, hey, you have your sins forgiven. He wants to actually give you the best life possible. So what are you afraid to hope for? What are you anticipating that if you hope for it, it's actually just going to, like, you're going to be let down? We all have that thing. We all have something in there, right? And we don't want to talk about it, we don't want to think about it, because the reality of it is that, like, when you think about it, when you talk about it, it gives you hope, it gives you dreams and all this. But then life happens. And it's just going to be part of that devastating reality of us. But I would encourage you, just here's the reminder, the crocus flower and the empty tomb, that you and I can start hoping again. That we can build a life better for our future generations. Not just for ourselves, but the future generations and stuff like that. And that's what hope does for us. I was doing some research on the effects of hope and hopelessness, and what I'm going to tell you is gross, and it's just like, but it's so awesome at the same time. But you've been warned, it's gross. So this guy in the 1950s, like 54, his name's Dr. Richter, he was doing some lab work. If you're part of PETA, don't send me an email, I don't care. Let's put it that way. So he decides to start doing the studies with rats. And he was trying to figure out how long could rats survive in water with no way out. And so the first group of rats, he decides to take them, puts them in this tub of just water. How long can they survive? Now, rats are notorious for surviving like fire, storms, earthquakes, black plagues, all that kind of stuff, right? And so here he takes these rats, he puts them in a tub, and the first group of rats would swim, but they only swam for 15 minutes, and after that, all of them were dead in a tub of water. So the next group of rats, he was like, I wonder what happens if we start training them a little bit, conditioning for them. So they started working with this group of rats. They put them in the tub of water. They would actually like submerge them into the water and keep them there for a little bit, but after a while, they'd bring them up out of the water, let them hang out, dry off, and they did it again, not like all at once, but like over the course of several days to train and condition these rats. And when they put them into the tub for like the test, that meant they all died, they swam for 60 straight hours. It went from 15 minutes to 60 straight hours because they realized they were conditioned. Eventually I'm going to get rescued. Eventually I'm going to have hope. The first group of rats died because of hopelessness. There's no hope. The second group of rats, 245% longer than the first group of rats, all because of hope. There's something about a hope that we can have. Like I'm hopeful for spring now. I have to remind myself over and over again, this is what I'm telling you guys, this is not the end of the world, it's just another snowstorm. Come late February, early March, I'm going to see this burst of color and be like, okay, that's it, right? Now, when I first see the crocus flower, the burst of color, does that mean that snow's all melted? Does that mean that no more winter storms? Does that mean that there's no more snow that I'm going to have to worry about? I'm going to like bust out my short shorts, right? And go running? Probably not, because that'd be weird, right? Like, I don't want to see that. But I'm not going to do that. Here's why. Because there's still going to be snow. Just because the burst of color happened doesn't mean that everything's just back to perfect. What I would call perfect, right? In fact, when we lived in Michigan, Heather got all dressed up for Mother's Day one May, and then all of a sudden a massive snowstorm happened. But I was like, hey, I saw the crocus flower. I know that spring is coming. And she's like, I don't care. I'm wearing boots and winter stuff and Mother's Day. Not my Mother's Day dress, whatever she had. I don't even know. I don't know, but I just don't know what she was wearing that day. But she really wanted to be like all dolled up and cute for Mother's Day because she had two cute boys, and I was like, but you're gonna wear snow boots. How about that? So that's what happens sometimes, right? Sometimes we see this burst of color, but then it doesn't mean that everything just wipes away and goes away easily. And that's what we're going to talk about next week. What does it look like for you and I to step in with hope and to start bringing color to the gray world? To bring righteousness and justice to an evil and corrupt world that we live in. That's what we get to carry on as followers of Jesus. But in this midst, I just don't want you to lose hope just because it's not spring yet, just because it's not new life yet. There's a process that's going to take place. And the crocus flower reminds us that winter isn't eternal. And the empty tomb reminds us that, like, evil doesn't get the last word. Death does not get the last word. In a world full of corruption, evil, and division, and all that, the empty tomb reminds us, hey, I've conquered death. It's over with. This is the beauty of the spirit, the theological realities of that Jesus conquers sin on the cross, what we talked about last week. And he also conquered death with the empty tomb. That you and I can trust in something. Are these events real? Absolutely. Are they most true real? Are they the realest thing around us? Not at all. Because of the empty tomb. Because of what Jesus offers for you and I. And while it may feel and seem hopeless, it's not. You can have hope. Now, you're not a rat, so don't feel like, oh, great, I can sit, like, no, but there is hope. And it can bring us something that we can continually press on for. And I would encourage you, whatever you're afraid to hope for, keep hoping for it. Let's pray. God, thanks for this day. Thanks for who you are. Jesus, thanks that you didn't wait for us to be ready. You came in and you offer us new life. That while we were still sinners, you died on the cross for us. You conquered sin. And you conquered death by rising from the dead. And no one had to roll that stone away. You did it on your own. Jesus, thanks for a movement and a mission and a message that elevates everyone, that brings us all up to value, dignity, and worth. No matter who we are, no matter where we came from. And so, Jesus, we put our hope and faith into you. And we ask that that thing that we're afraid of, to hope for, God, would we trust in you that you're going to do something even greater? We're so grateful. Your sacrifice on the cross made salvation possible for us. We're also so grateful that resurrection means that death does not get the last word. And while the world may not be perfect yet, there's a process of redeeming and restoring it and making all things new. So thank you for that. We love you, Jesus. It's in you we pray this. Amen. Well, hey, if you need prayer for anything, I'd love to pray with you. I'll be back at the green wall for that. In church, I want you to know this to be true, that God loves you and that I love you. And as we follow him, we come and bless the offer for us. So let's go and be the church. Have a great week. We'll see you next Sunday.